All right, so today what we're going to talk about is how to take user input. So we want to ask questions of the user and we want to elicit an answer, and then we want to do something with that answer. What's the kind of question you could ask somebody who's using your program?
What is your name?
What's your name? What's another example?
Age.
Age? Anything else? What else?
Daniel said it. Wait. What's your credit card information?
What's your credit card information, social security, and the code on the 3-digit code on the back? Yes. Yeah. What other kinds of questions might you ask? Yes. Birthday. So we got different ones. We got names. We got birthday. We've got.
What's your eye color?
Say it again.
What's your eye color?
What's your eye color? So I'm hearing two different kinds of answers here. There's the kind of answers that would elicit a word or a phrase as a response, and the kind of questions that would elicit a number as a response. So we're going to talk about how to take both of those and how to deal with them. So in BlueJ here, I'm going to go ahead and start a new project. And I have a folder made for this class. And I'm going to call this folder Scanner Basics. And that's where I'm going to call the project itself Scanner Basics as well. So we need a new class here. And whenever you name a class, remember that the first letter, yes, go ahead. Yeah. The first letter of each word of the class should be capitalized. So I'm going to call this Scanner Basics. And when you name a class, there can't be any space in there. Okay. And so in BlueJ, we got these diagonal lines. And remember, that just means it hasn't been compiled yet. We haven't compiled it yet because we haven't written any code, which we're about to do. So I'm going to open the editor here. And whenever you open the editor in BlueJ, it comes with all this fancy stuff in here. So I usually just delete it out. And we usually just want to put our names here. Mr. Alexander, hello. Thank you for watching at home. This is period 6 today. And this is an introduction to the scanner class. Now, the scanner class, which is what we use to take user inputs, it's not a part of default Java, so we actually have to import it into the system. And the way you do that, you type the word import, and that's just going to tell Java, hey, there's some functions I want to use that aren't part of the default. And you have to know the name of the class, which in this case is scanner. So you do java.util.scanner, and that's going to import the scanner class. Now, that's not the only class that you might want to import in the future. That's the only one we're going to be using today, but as you build more robust programs, there might be other things you want to import as well. Yes?
So if you want to import more things, would you put that in a separate import command, or would you just put it all in the same command?
So it depends. If it's part of the utilities, then you can change scanner into an asterisk, and that's going to import everything in the utility class. But if it's a completely different class, like java.awt or something, you'd have to do that in a separate import statement. So we're not going to be using that in other stuff, but there's other functionality that you can import, and you'll find those as we continue to go through the course here. But for today, we're just using the scanner class, so that's the only one I'm going to import. Now, inside my public class here, you always have to have the main method. So what's the main method? What am I going to type right now first? I'll get public static. What's the next word? Void main string, and put in the square brackets there, args, if you can spell it correctly, arg, and then a couple of parentheses. And I like the curly brackets. I like to line up the curly brackets. You don't have to, but it just helps me see what's going on here. So what I want to do now is I want to create what's called a scanner object. We haven't learned what objects are yet. We haven't learned how to create them, how to initialize them. And so for now, I'm going to give you the command, and just know that we're going to talk about it some more in a couple of weeks here. But the way you create a new scanner object is you say, hey, I want to create something that's called a scanner. And you have to give this scanner a name. You can call it whatever you want. You could call it cool. You could call it X. But what most people call the scanner objects is the we call it keyboard or KB for short to indicate that the information for this class is coming from the keyboard. So some people type it out, keyboard. That's too many characters. I don't like to type that much. So what you'll see me do is KB. I'm going to call it KB, short for keyboard. And what this keyboard object is a new scanner. And then inside the parentheses here, we have to say system.in. Right? And what this line of code does, there's a lot of stuff going on here. We'll talk about what each piece of this is, but the KB is the name, the scanner is the object. And this is just creating this scanner object. And the word new is what tells Java that you're making a new scanner object. We'll talk about each of these pieces more later on, but for now, this is good enough to create a scanner object. This object has certain functionality. It can do certain things. The things that this scanner object can do, we can ask the user to type in an integer, and it returns it. We can ask for a double, a float, a long, a byte, a short, a next line. These are not the only things it can do, but we were talking about variables last class, or 2 classes ago. So now we can ask the user to give us a variable, and we're going to store it. The ones that you're probably going to use are, there's only 4 of them you're probably going to use. Next int, next double, next, and next line. So I just want to really briefly talk about those 4, because those are the 4 that you'll most likely use. Just know that the scanner class has other functionality, and we'll talk about the rest of that functionality probably next semester. But for now, this is going to be good enough to get what we want. So how do you use it? Well, let's ask a question. System.out.println, and I'm going to ask, hey, what's your favorite color? Now, what kind of response should I expect to get from the question? Or sorry, not color, not yet. Let's do number first. Sorry. What kind of response should I expect to get from the question, what's your favorite number?
Or an integer typed out number.
Yeah, what if their favorite number is pi, right? There's one of 2 options. It's either an integer or a double. Now, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it's an integer value. Then the way we get it is we have to initialize, we have to create that integer value, and let's just call it num. We'll call the variable num. So we say it's an integer. And where's it coming from? It's coming from this keyboard object. We're going to get the next integer. So what happens here is we ask the question, hey, what's your favorite number? And then they type it into the keyboard. And when they hit enter, it's going to store whatever they type, whatever integer value they store, we're going to put it in num. So we could do something simple like, we could just print it out. This isn't going to be very interesting, but we say, your favorite number is, and we'll just return it. Let's try it. I'm going to compile it, and I'm going to run it. What's your favorite number? What's your favorite number, y'all? That's a really strange number. 318? There it is. Okay, so the program's working. Now, I'm going to run it again. What if 318 wasn't your favorite number? 24,332 is your favorite number? 42. Oh. It's a palindrome. 0.5. If I put the 0.5 on there because you couldn't quite decide between 24,342 and 24,343. Man, I can talk. What happens when I put the 0.5 in there?
There's an error.
It's going to break that program. Why? It even highlights it for you. Yeah, it's 0.5 is a double, so it can't take an integer value. So we'd have to do something else. So the easy way to fix that is to just change it into a double. Now, when I compile it and I run it, now my favorite number is 120.5, and it works. But what if my favorite number wasn't a decimal? What if it's just 27? Look what happens to that value. What did it do to 27?
It added a 0.0 to it.
Yeah, so you can go from integer values to doubles, but you can't go from doubles to integers. Yeah, we'll talk about casting next class, which kind of complicates things. TBD, yes.
So what happens if, would it accept it if you said like next int, but then you put 27.0? Would it just like truncate it, or would it like just make an error?
Let's test it. That's a good question, and I don't know the answer. So next int, and make it an integer value. So the question was, what if I typed in, now it's only going to accept an integer. What if I type in 27.0? Will it truncate it to 27 or will it break the program? I honestly don't know the answer. What do y'all think? Broke the program. Yep. Will not take that decimal point. That's a good question. Good to know. All right. So there are, we talked about there's two different kinds of data you can elicit. A quantitative answer, which would be a number. Just talked about that. We use next int, next double. What if the answer is something that would require you to enter like a phrase or a word? How would that work? We're going to need to make a string. Oh, this class is so smart. I'm glad I decided to record this one. So let's just ask a simple question like, how are you? How are you? You're going to say, good, great, whatever. And since that's a phrase, we need to declare a string. When you declare a string, it's capital S. And we got two options here. We can either use next or next line.
Next line.
I think next line would be a better idea since it can encompass more answers.
Well, let's just see what each one of them does. I don't want to call this num anymore. Let's call it phrase. So how are you?
Bueno.
Okay, how are you? I'm bueno. What does next do?
Only takes the first word.
Next will only take the first word. So it will. You can only ask questions that are one word answers. Like, what's your favorite color? Probably be next. I think most colors are, unless you're getting your colors from a Crayola box, most colors are one word. So if you got something that's multiple words, you're going to want to use next line instead. And so now, when I ask you, how are you? You could say something along the line, I'm very well, thank you, sir. And it will print the whole thing. Yes, Neil?
So what's the point of having like next? Because wouldn't you could just use like one word? Would next line also cover that?
Yeah, so you could use next line. The only difference is that next line also catches white space. So if they just type one word and then put a space at the end of it on accident, like they hit the space bar before hitting enter, it's going to pick up that white space as well. So if you just want the word, it's probably better to just use next. That just to make sure the user doesn't type in too much, essentially. All right. But you can, you're probably right. Most of the time you could just use next line. That's going to get what you need most of the time. Okay, so now we can elicit information. We got 4 commands: next int, next double, next, and next line. But nothing we've done so far is very interesting. So now I'm just going to show you some really, really basic math. All right, so that we can do something more interesting. Let's just write a really basic program that can either add 3 numbers, or it will subtract 3 numbers. Oops, didn't want to do that. Let's hear the question.
So what happens if you put like, let's say it asks for like, what's your birthday? And you put in, just for example, I don't know, 5/26/02.
Mm-hmm.
Would that have to be a line since the slashes exist, or would that have to be?
The slashes will read in as part of the one word. So it would be, you could use next or next line in that.
So you wouldn't use an integer?
Definitely not an integer because the slashes won't read.
Okay.
Unless you entered the value, unless you said what month, what day, what year, and you stored that as 3 separate integers, you'd want to store it as a string.
All right.
Good question. All right, so let's write a really basic program here. And here's what I want to do. I want to just add 3 numbers or subtract 3 numbers. All right, real basic program. So I'm going to ask the user to enter 3 numbers. Well, actually, I'm going to ask them system.out.println. And I want to ask them, do you want to add or subtract? So the easy way to do that is just say enter 1 to add or enter 2 to subtract. All right, we're just going to give them 2 options. Now there's 2 cases here. They either enter 1 or 2, but in either case, what kind of value am I going to get back? Integer. So I need to declare that integer. And let's just call this answer. And it's going to be kb.next int. All right, so I've got this integer value. Now I need to decide, am I adding 3 numbers or am I subtracting? And it depends on what they say. It's either 1 or 2. In unit 3 of this class, I think, is when we start getting into if statements. But y'all are smart, and I think you can handle a really basic if statement. And in Java, the way you do an if statement is like this. If, and answer equals 1. So when you're doing logic in Java, if you want to know if you're doing comparison, you're going to use 2 equal signs. Assignment, like for variables, is 1 equal sign, but when you're comparing 2 things, it's 2 equal signs. So if the answer is 1, then we want to system.out.println. We just want to ask for 3 numbers. And let's say enter 3 numbers. We're just going to add them together. All right, so then they're going to give me 3 numbers. So I'm just going to spit them right back out, except I'm going to do kb.x double. Let's use double because they might enter decimals. Let's just add them all together. There's the first one. There's the second one. There's the third one. So you can do it right there in the print statement. Take 1, add it to the next one, add it to the next one. That's if they answer 1. What if they don't? Well, then we would want to do else if answer equals 2. We want to copy and paste the no, what? You can't prove anything. And then we just want to subtract those 3 numbers instead. Now, what if they're dumb? What if they don't enter a 1 or a 2? What should we prompt them to do?
We tried. Tell them that they were wrong. Invalid input.
Invalid input. I like that. Let's go with that. All right, so this is just a really simple if-then sort of situation. We're either going to say, hey, do you want to add or subtract? If they want to add, we're going to add 3 numbers. If they want to subtract, we'll subtract the 3 numbers. So let's try it out. Let's make sure it works. And then we'll be done for the day. Okay, so what do we want to do? Do we want to add or subtract? Add. All right, give me 3 numbers. Wow, very creative. So when we add those, even though I entered 3 integers, it's going to add 1 plus 2 plus 3, and it's going to turn it into a double because I gave I wanted to make sure that the program wouldn't break. All right, so adding works. Let's try it. Subtracting. So we'll do 2. Give me 3 numbers.
6, 5.2,
6, 5.2, and what?
and 1.
Okay. So 6 minus 5.2 is 0.8 minus 1 is negative 0.20. I don't know where that 1/8 is coming from. That's interesting.
Let's go.
That's cool. Yeah, I don't know why that didn't work the way I want. That's interesting.
Made it go negative.
Huh?
Is it supposed to be?
It's order of operations. No, it's a double because of the 5.2. Something about the RAM there, when it got to 0.8 minus 1, it didn't like doing that for some
Maybe you
reason.
just have to truncate it.
Yeah, and there's a way to do that, but
Let's try the invalid input.
oh yeah, let's do the let's see let's make sure the program doesn't break any further.
24,340.
24,300 and 42. Invalid input. So there it is. Okay, so we wrote a very simple program. Okay, so now, oh, it is a palindrome. So now, thanks for watching. Bye. How do I turn this off?